It is nice. So I watched all the highlights from all the NFL preseason games and, had some basic observations on guys who I think are going to pop. San Francisco, to me, is a fascinating team. A couple of years ago, they liked their defensive personnel, but they didn't have much on the perimeter. And I'm watching them this weekend, and John Lynch got aggressive. They have given Kyle Shanahan a young tight end last year out of Iowa. They went and drafted 2 receivers this year, one last year, Dante Pettis, Marquise Goodwin. I watched them this weekend, and I thought, oh, Lord, this offense could be special. John Middlecoff writes for The Athletic, a former NFL scout. He's part of my 3 and Out podcast on the Herd Podcast Network. So it's interesting. Teams, John, as you know as a scout, Pittsburgh drafts wide receivers well. New England does very well with offensive linemen, not so well with wide receivers. San Francisco has had some struggles figuring out the defensive linemen. I think they've overpaid and overdrafted. But I watched their offense this weekend, and, man, I was just watching backups and rookies. I don't think I'm exaggerating. I think this team could win a division. You watch practices. You watch every press conference. What do you make of the Niners?
Well, I think they have a chance to compete for the division, Colin, but that's partly because I don't think this division's going to be that great this year. Obviously, the Rams have run away with it the last couple of years. To me, they're probably more of a 9-10 win season. Seattle, losing Frank Clark, when you look at their roster on paper, it's, last year they overachieved. They're going to need to overachieve more, but they have a culture there. To me, 7, 8, 9 wins right there. I think it's not crazy that 9, 10 definitely to me wins this division. So if they can keep Jimmy Garoppolo healthy, and the way I describe the 2 wide receivers, I think you're specifically talking about Deebo Samuel and Jalen Hurts.
Yep.
Two guys. One started out as an SEC running back. The other was an SEC wide receiver. There is a culture in the SEC of just toughness and physicality that the Niners have lacked. I mean, the Patriots take a lot of grief over the years for missing on wide receivers. The Niners have missed on a lot. I mean, A.J. Jenkins, a guy that Trent Baalke drafted years ago in the first round, had 1 career target for the Niners. They have not drafted well at wide receiver. And Dante Pettis, there's still, to me, a lot to be desired there. They took him in the second round. These 2 kids came in, and immediately there's a physicality to them. The first practice, Jalen Hurd, because he was hurt during the OTAs, part of his offense, his wide receivers got to block. And he was blocking defensive backs so far down the field that they were creating fights in practice because his physical style. And Deebo, you go to practice, he gets open with ease. I think these guys have and Kyle tried to temper the enthusiasm, but it doesn't take Bill Walsh to see that these 2 guys jump off the screen.
I mean, I've always liked Jimmy G. Like Carson Wentz, there's an injury concern. I don't think he's Carson Wentz as a talent, but there is something about him. Taking your scout background, what do you like about Jimmy G? What concerns you?
Yeah, I think the things you like from an intangible standpoint, it doesn't get much better in terms of the way the guys react to him, the way they view him as a leader, the way he interacts with his teammates, and just his ability to retain information. I mean, he learned from the best, right? He learned from Tom. He learned from Bill. And then he should thank his lucky stars every day for a lot of, I'm sure we'll talk about the Raiders a little bit later, that Derek Carr had to go to the Raiders. This guy's got Belichick and Kyle Shanahan. So there's a level of stability and just high-level offense that he's taken in from day one, and he can handle it. His physical attributes are pretty darn good. He's really accurate. His arm strength, you just stand there at practice, is more than enough. Now, he's not the biggest quarterback, but, he's definitely big enough. He's that Aaron Rodgers mold, which I think leads to the negative is that one of his biggest strengths, really his probably biggest strength as a player, is kind of ad-libbing when he needs to. And he's not a runner, but he can make things happen behind the line of scrimmage like Aaron does, like Russell Wilson does, and make big plays outside of the pocket. Well, it's led to 2 major injuries. In New England, the time he hurt his shoulder when Tom was suspended for Deflategate, he got slammed on his shoulder right next to the sideline. Last year, tearing his ACL, it was scrambling. And they've really talked about trying to harness that. And I don't know if you saw the clip this weekend. Patrick Mahomes was scrambling around, and he hit the ground really fast. And he looked to Andy, and he smiled, but you could tell. I saw Andy talk about it after the game. You got to be careful, man. The entire franchise is riding on this player. If Jimmy plays 16 games, he's only started 10 in his career. 10 in his career. I do think the 49ers will have a chance. I'm not quite as bullish as I was before training camp just because, Colin, they can't stay healthy.
I know.
They lose like a player a day.
Yeah.
It's the craziest thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, they have an injury issue, and it could be training staff, but I've noticed the same thing. They are really struggling to stay healthy. I want to segue to the Raiders. I mean, John Gruden's going to say publicly, I support AB. Do you think there's an ounce of regret that he signed him?
I think there's an element talking to people with the Raiders. Gruden's like Al Davis. Talent means so much to him. He doesn't mind some of the off the field stuff. I don't think – I mean, this has been crazy, Colin. Even John Gruden or an old-school Al Davis, this would have been driving them nuts. He shows up, and I know Gruden – and I give the Raiders credit. Gruden went out of his way because Antonio is very sensitive. And to me, old-school Gruden would have done this. Gruden's a different guy. The old-school kind of the younger version of Parcells, the offensive version, that guy's kind of gone. If you watch Hard Knocks, he's kind of nice. He's not as big of a – how can I put it, an a-hole as maybe he once was. Yeah. And I think you see him interacting with you guys. He goes over the top, trying to interact with these millennials. And in the press conference after the game, he got Antonio's back every step of the way. They tweeted it out. They included Antonio. They understand how he deals with this. But to burn your feet and then have this helmet issue, again, if 100 guys in the league were having this issue, you'd go, okay, no big deal. He's the one guy. And I think this has got to be driving him nuts. The main reason it's driving him nuts, Colin, he's the offensive coordinator. The offense is his baby. He wants Antonio to look good. I mean, that's his side of the ball. That's where I think it's really bothering him is his best player. And he mentioned this in the press conference after the game. Like, Antonio, I got plays for you. Please come back. Right. Like, we need you. And at the end of the day, Antonio's so good, and now he kind of has the franchise under his control because he's so talented. It's not like they're going to get rid of him anytime soon. Yeah. The relationship with Derek Carr is interesting. I like Derek. Like Garoppolo, I think he has some intangible things I like. I don't know if he's a great leader. He can be real sensitive. I see that on social media. Do you think long-term Gruden and Derek Carr, they're joined at the hip? 8 years from now, they're still together? Yeah, but I couldn't say that right now by any means. They can get out of the contract next year for like $3 million in dead cap. This is a make-or-break year for Derek. I do think that Gruden, and I even heard this last year, that they love his work ethic. They love his physical tools. They love him Monday through Saturday. And sometimes last year there were moments in games, now the team wasn't great, where he just had some times to just let it rip. And he just wasn't. Now, toward the end of the season, he flashed a little bit of that guy that had a chance to win the MVP a couple years ago. I've heard he's had a great training camp. But all that stuff, once you're in year 6, year 7, no one cares about that anymore. It's just about the games. And that's why I think it's so important for them to get 84 back, because for Derek to have success and for him to maintain and be this team's franchise quarterback as they move to Vegas, he's going to need to be productive. And the only way he's going to be productive is with Antonio on the field. So I'd say right now it's 50-50. If Antonio doesn't play, this team's a debacle. Now, if he plays, their defense is going to be bad, but I do think their offense, Antonio, Tyrell Williams, their offensive line's pretty good. The Josh Jacobs kid's pretty good from Alabama. They have Jalen Richard, kind of a little backup, scat back. They have some pieces. So I could see their offense being productive, where they could go 6-10 or 7-9 and have an explosive offense and it not be Derek's fault and him just maintain being the quarterback. But if he has like a 20 touchdown, 12 interception season where the offense is bad, yeah, I mean, he'll be gone.
Yeah. John Middlecoff, he's part of the 3 and Out podcast on the Herd Podcast Network. Bay Area, very updated on NFL stuff, especially the Bay Area. I really lean on him. John, good talking to you, bud.
Thanks, Colin. Have a good one. All right.
Yeah, it'll be funny on the Raiders. I like Derek Carr. I don't get the reservations on Derek Carr. I mean, listen, as I was watching preseason, the one thing that really jumped out at me is there's so much wide receiver talent in the NFL. I like recruiting. I'm a recruiting dork. So I watch high school football tape and watch the recruiting. I have for years. I don't talk about it on the air. There's a lot of things I like watching. I don't talk about them on the air. And so I noticed this about 10 years ago. The state of California's got 38 million people, and they've got about 2 great running backs out of high school a year. They've got about 20 good receivers. So kids are smart. My kids are like this. I'll say, what do you want to do in life? And they're like, oh, this. And I'm like, you should do that. And they'll be like, it doesn't pay anything. And I'm like, well, so what? You should be a teacher. You get summers off. Well, I would pay enough to go on nice trips. Athletes do the same. Athletes look at it and go, all right. Used to be a lot of great athletes want to go into boxing. Guys are like, I don't have to get my face beat in. I don't want to go boxing. Athletes look around, and I think they look at running back and going, you don't get paid, and you get hurt a lot. And like Greg Jennings said, then you got to wide receiver, and you're like, I only have to beat one guy? I like it. So when I watch this league, I just see so many great athletes now out wide receiver. Tight ends now can run. And I see a lot of good quarterbacks. So my question becomes, we've been talking about this. I've been talking about this with buddies. Next year in this draft, Oregon, Georgia, and Alabama have first-round quarterbacks. They're all top 10 talents. I'm not sure who needs a quarterback. I mean, if Jameis Winston hits in Arizona and Marcus Mariota works in Tennessee, they're not moving off those guys. So, I mean, and I think, Matt Stafford, Andy Dalton, are you going to roll the dice and bail on them if they win 8-9 games? Derek Carr, I look at Derek Carr and I'm like, you can get to a Super Bowl, Derek Carr. I can get to a Super Bowl, Derek Carr. Absolutely. Well, why can't I? I saw him almost, a couple years ago with Jack Del Rio, a defensive coach. He lit the league up. He's better now. He should be because Gruden's he got much better weapons now than he did then. Here's Joy with the news. No.